Got folks coming in. That's what I'd like to see. We'll get started here in a few minutes. Mr. Scott, how are you?
Good afternoon. I'm good. How are you?
Great. Great. Can't complain at all. I think Cordell, you inspired me. I think our breaking bread session at the beginning here, I got something that I will propose to the group and we'll talk about, which I think will be fun. But it's going to be a surprise to everybody. And I'm trying to think about the best way to position it.
Well, I hope it actually includes food.
Food sounds great. All right, folks are coming in. That's what I like to see. Hey, Sawa.
Hi, Jevin. How are you? I'm driving home, so
Yeah,
yep.
We got you. Don't worry. Look, it's 5:30. So if I had to take a guess, because this is our Tuesday night hangout group, you're probably like 15, 20 minutes away from home.
Unfortunately, there's a crash, so about 30 minutes.
Man, I see I was close. On a normal
Yeah,
week,
on a
but about
regular day,
15.
you're right. On a regular day.
Look, we're on the same wavelength here. Cedric, graduations come in. How are things in your world?
Oh man, don't even ask, man. It's I got 32 graduations, and then the fortunate is no prom because we do our office does the sobriety for proms, but thank goodness we don't have any proms. Cordell, real quick, you sent me a text. Can we talk about that?
Sure. We'll talk when we. I'll shoot you my phone number.
Yeah, and I'll give you my number so we can talk.
Okay, great.
If we're going into our groups today, I'll just give you my number then. Okay, great. And Molly, I missed my group because when somehow I got kicked out and I tried to get back in last week, I couldn't get in, and this part of the Zoom was closed.
Yes. So we'll make sure we email out the link for the subcommittees so that you can log on to that as well. So you have a backup.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And this time, just put whatever I clicked on and it kicked me back. Just when we break out, just put me in. It's easier.
I will do the best I can.
Okay.
Hey, all right. I love that. Michael Rubin, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing okay.
That's good. Well, did you all I know you were going through an audit. How's your audit going? And your draft?
That's going okay. Well, I'm round 18 of the draft. It's a 25 round draft. So it's going faster than I thought it was going to go.
It's 1 hour. Is 1 hour draft times, right?
No, you got 8 hours, up to 8 hours, but people aren't taking that much time. So it's going. So yeah, it's going to take about a week to get through it. So
imagine a 2-week NFL draft where each team had 8 hours. That would be great.
Yeah, only when people are trying to package up trades and stuff is it taking longer. So usually people know who they're going to take. So
that makes sense. That's great. Well, we'll get started here in just a few moments. We'll give folks a few more minutes to get here. Lauren, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good to hear.
I was out. I'm sorry that I missed last week, but it was my birthday, and we went out of town. We went to Turks and Caicos, so we got back on Saturday.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Look, I understand that you don't want to hang out with your Tuesday night social group, but I'm glad you had a great. I'm glad you had a great birthday.
I did. It was great.
Good. That sounds amazing. That's good. Ajamel, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks all. Hopefully you're all well too. Thank you.
Amazing. Let me see, doing a head count. We have about 9 members here. I know Sadie and Jemana is not going to be here today. That puts us at 11. And so we're only missing Chris and another person or two. So let's get started here. Emil, how are you? And folks that come in so that we can stay on track. All righty. It is, if I recall, according to my calendar today, it is May 18th. Welcome to the May 18th installment of the Reimagining Public Safety in Takoma Park Task Force meeting. It is a great honor to be with you all. We're super excited, as you know. You're joined here by your consultant team with Link Strategic Partners, Michael, Molly, Jamal, Jevin, and Cordell. But task force members, let's get together. Let's do our quick breaking bread session. We'll go around 10 seconds. We had a quick conversation before we kicked off today, and we were talking about working from home. And this is something I feel like we don't talk about very often, but what is your favorite work from home location in which you're working from? Is it outside? Is it at your table? Is it at your desk, the barbecue, wherever that may be? I want you all, let's go through our favorite work from home location since we're all nearly in the same environment here. Does that sound like a good icebreaker question today? All right, Dwayne, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So my favorite work from home location is not where I'm at right now. It would be outside. Every once in a while I get a chance to, especially since the weather is nice, I can go out in the backyard and enjoy the weather and get some work done that way. So
That's right.
That would be it.
That's right. I like that. Cordell.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually right here. I'm standing in front of my bay windows, and I have bird feeders out. And one of my hobbies over the COVID enforced work from home is getting into birding. I have my field guide and everything from the Audubon Society, and I have 3 different bird feeders for different birds, and I throw wine corks at the squirrels. Official
amazing.
old man stuff I'm doing.
Cedric.
During the whole pandemic, I worked out of my cruiser, so I don't have really a workplace at home. But when I do, sometimes I like to be down in the basement.
Yeah, there you go. Well, the cruiser counts as a work from home location as well. Jamal?
Mine would be outdoor as well.
Yeah,
It's not cold.
You gotta have a nice rooftop. That works. Adam, what about you?
I'm gonna hop on the bandwagon and say outdoors as well. I like to sit out on my front porch.
Are you a bird watcher too?
Yeah. I may watch my kids so they don't run in the street.
Oh, that works. So. Yeah, that definitely works. Michael.
Well, I have not worked from home this whole year. I've been at the office, the only person at the office. So if I was going to work from home, it would be my front porch, but I just noticed a wasp's nest formed in the last 2 weeks right next to where I sit. So I'm not so sure that's an ideal spot right now either. So
yeah, wasps are no fun. You have to get that one taken care of. G-Day, what about you?
Working from the desk.
Love it. I love it. Michael?
This Michael?
Yes.
Yes, sorry. I'm working from what used to be my dining room. And I was like, honey, can I just hang a banner and take it over? And so it's been a great place. She works from the foyer, I work from the dining room, and our boy just bounces between us all day. This is my favorite spot.
There we go. Dan, what about you?
I've been working in the office, but if I had to choose, it would be outside somewhere.
Well, that works. Outdoors. Some good sunlight. That's right. Sawa, I know you're driving, so you can jump in if you would like.
Just like Michael, I've been working. So either way, I hate staying home. So if I was teleworking, I would go crazy.
Yeah, it's not the easiest thing. Ajamel?
I think it's where y'all usually see me in front of the brick wall down here in my rec room. So yeah, this has always been my spot.
And what a brick wall provides for a nice stoic background. It's great. It's powerful.
The ball also bounces directly back to you off a brick wall.
Very true. Kiminori?
I think at the dining table, maybe looking over the backyard, something like that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, right now, I guess we could work outside, but then into the summer, there are too many mosquitoes and very difficult. So
that makes sense. That makes sense. Molly Mitzner.
I'm liking this desk I have. It's adjustable, so I'm moving it up and down. It's pretty nice. I can just go out of view.
Lauren?
We have a sleeping porch off my master bedroom that I've changed into my closet office. So it's my cloffice. So that's my favorite place to work from home.
There was so much there. You have
I know.
that you turned into a closet office.
A closet office, yes.
Yeah, that definitely wins. I love it. I love it. Claudia?
I actually ended up purchasing a desk, so I think I made a nice working nook in my living room, but now it's kind of turned into the place we put everything that doesn't have a place to go.
Yep, a de facto storage unit.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Emil, close us out.
Well, I had a desk before, and so with a desktop computer, so that is my working space. But listening to all of you, I think that probably I should be trying to work outside more. So that may become more of my place to work again, thanks to the input from this group.
I would follow that lead, especially right now before it gets too hot in the summer months and get some of that really nice sunlight out there. My favorite work from home place is really funny. I actually like to go over to my grandmother's house because it's quiet. So I work from there from time to time, which is always a good place and it's fun. Molly, can you cue the slideshow? Thank you all for indulging in my work from home questions. Icebreakers for today. All righty. So we, you know the drill here. We are making our way through the remaining timeline that we have here. The charge for the task force is we're doing what we're supposed to be doing here, reimagining public safety here in Takoma Park, and we're going to get those recommendations in place so we have the need that meets the needs for our community to ensure that we have an emphasis on our inequities and everything else that goes along with it. No, that's fine, Molly. As we head down to public comment, please, please, please be sure to share with your friends, your neighbors, your family, anybody who lives in Takoma Park, send them to the website. Right here is a direct link. Jamal will drop it in for you all so that we can, you can text it, you can email it, you can do whatever it may be to get to that link out to folks. We have our community listening session coming up next Monday from 6:30 to 8 p.m., much like our previous listening session, where we will talk about where we are in the process. We'll speak about some of the updates that we have from our committees, and we will gather feedback from the community so that we can interpret that into the process. Here's the flyer that we have for the public listening session. We will re-share that with you so that you have that. Again, please share that far and wide, send it to your network, send it to your friends, your family members, anybody that is in the community that would be willing to provide some input. Here's our timeline. So as you've seen, as we walk through where we are, today's the 18th. Next week, we have our community listening session, and then we have our subcommittee meetings. Starting at the next week's subcommittee meetings, we want to use a great portion of that time, as I described in our subcommittee breakout session, to squeeze the juice out of the fruit, and let's start to consolidate so that we can move towards crafting recommendations per the recommendation of the task force. As you see now, we have a June month added to the task force calendar with alternating task force and committee listening sessions. Molly, can you go to the next slide so we can break that down a little bit further? Alternating alternating subcommittee and task force meetings on the 1st, 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th. As of right now, we have a tentative listening session planned for June 17th. That is a Thursday. So if anybody has any objections to that date, please let us know. Molly, you can take down the slide deck for us. Please let us know. We could do any other day that week. Would work for us. We could do Monday, we could do Wednesday, we could do Thursday. As of right now, we've been moving along with the either Monday or Thursday dates. By a quick show of head nods or pulse here for the room, does anybody have any objections to doing it Thursday, the 17th of that week? Michael, you have you're thumbs down or thumbs up?
I'm going to be on a plane during that time, so earlier in the week would work, but that one won't work.
Okay. What about, how does that Monday look for everybody? Well, that would be the 14th. Do we have any conflicts on Monday the 14th? Okay, seeing no conflicts, we'll recommend that to the city, and then we'll get that locked in by next meeting for everybody. So we'll lock in that Monday, June 14th, as our community listening session. And that community listening session will effectively take the place of us presenting our preliminary recommendations to the community so that they can have reactions to them, and we can work in our remaining meetings to consolidate the community feedback that we receive and the conversation that we are having amongst ourselves as the task force.
Jevin, can I just throw out really quickly that we won't announce that June meeting yet until we get another week or so into the process. That meeting is really supposed to be the one where we're saying, here are some initial recommendations for feedback. The 14th would only give us 2 more working sessions after next week. That might be a little too quick. If so, we'll push to the week of the 21st, but we'll do that in full coordination with all of you. The city did approve the extension by 1 month, which is great news. It gives us a little bit more time to get this done, but we also don't want to waste that time. So we're going to try and get all the SMEs that have been requested so far, either in today's meeting, we've got 2 great speakers, lots of them next week. And then after that, we really want to leave some room for the subcommittees and task force to do the work, supplemented by subject matter experts instead of getting a presentation and having very little time to speak. So we'll still have access to anyone who's needed, but we're going to get away from the presentations and really use those as working sessions. We also have full flexibility if we don't want to do them as task force subcommittee. If you want to spend 2 weeks as subcommittees, we've got a lot of flexibility on that, and we'll really follow your lead.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns with the timeline? Hearing none, I will pass it over to my colleague, Jamal, to lead us through subcommittee updates.
Awesome. Thank you, Jevin. So team, we had a wonderful discussion last meeting around subcommittees. And a lot of us really got closer and closer to even talking about some of the exploration for recommendations and where we want to focus the next few weeks. So what we're going to do now is for the sake of the group and round robin, so folks are on the same page, but get a general understanding of what other subcommittees are talking about. If we can go around and give updates, and we'll kick it off with the community quality of life. Sawa, as citizen lead, will give an update and we'll hand it off to any other task force members on those subcommittees who have anything else to add. So anything else, Jevin, you want to add to that before we kick it off to the community quality of life?
Yep. Actually, Jamal, if we could jump around and do, I know Saw was still driving, so if we could do our committee last so that we can, and we'll come back to that. That's okay with you.
That works. So let's kick it over to alternative methods and responses. Cordell.
Sure. So we've talked about dispatch data, the need to have it, and I believe it's forthcoming. I'll have to refer to my colleagues about that. But when we relayed that concern or that question to Chief Duvall, he indicated that they were almost done putting that into a report. The other thing we've talked about is just, obviously alternate methods of dispatch processes for non-violent interactions. Is there an equivalent of 311 here? Turns out there is. And just other issues related to the demographics of stops. What types of calls are the police responding to? How much of their time spent responding to just random calls? And I suspect that once we have that data in hand, we'll be able to really start working towards recommendations. Invite Michael, Cedric, or I don't see Sadie to offer out anything I forgot. Thank you.
Awesome. So I'll kick it off next with my subcommittee on community engagement and transparency. I know, Lauren, you couldn't make last meeting, but Adam or Kiminori, if you have anything to add, I can kick us off. If you have anything to add, feel free to do that. I know you all had lots of thoughts shared last meeting. So we talked a lot about transparency and policies for all agencies and departments. We dig a bit deeper on the website and the difficulties and where and when to navigate for that, and wanted to spend some time looking at good models of other agencies and other governments and municipalities and how they organize their websites. We talked about agencies having their own individual pages, website pages, as a way to easier direct to some of the resources, and also listing the policies, so all of the policies and initiatives associated with that agency. We then talked about transparency around the complaint system and how to handle that oversight. So we talked about police complaints and whether or not if that should be housed within the police department or should it be an independent board. We talked about setting up a potential board appointed by all parties to review complaints, knowing that there's not a lot of complaints in the city of Takoma Park. So the size of that board would be, will have to be up for conversation as well. But simply wanting to have a better sense around those complaints and the transparency within those complaints. Then we talked about body cam policy. It was set to be reviewed in 2022, so the group spent some time over the weekend digging into the policy. And the policy was put out in 2015 and said that this should be reviewed in 2022. There was some conversation on whether or not if that's too long in the tech world and if that policy moving forward should be condensed in timeline for review. We also talked about activities and agencies that are housed within the police department that shouldn't be in the police department, such as crossing guards, code enforcement. Should those be housed in other agencies to have more, to give those pieces of government a better focus? So we then talked about improvement of communication from timeline to cultural sensitivity, to the source of communication and what are the multi-channels involved and how we how the agencies and the government communicates to the public. So all of those things were up for discussion. So team, Adam, Kiminori, anything to add there? Jumana isn't here.
I would just add, I think that the two big things we were focusing in on in terms of actually making some concrete recommendations were some level of citizen oversight with the police complaints and updating the body cam policy. So if anyone in the larger task force has thoughts on that they want to send our way that we can try to fold in, it would be grateful for them. But I think that some citizen involvement in reviewing complaints against police has been a reform that's been pushed and has gotten off the ground in larger cities and larger agencies, and it would just take maybe a little bit of creative thinking to figure out how we would do that with a small town and a small department. But I think there could be a way. And we talked a little bit about the District of Columbia, which actually has a parallel system where you can have complaints investigated by the Internal Affairs Division of the DC Police, but you can also go to the Office of Police Complaints, which is civilian run. So there are some possibilities there in terms of having dual tracks if it wouldn't work to make it completely civilian run. And maybe Michael has an idea for our subcommittee.
Well, just a question, actually. I just wonder, has anyone in the committee thought about, or have you guys talked about whether complaints that are filed actually are reflective of satisfaction with the department or not? Because I've talked to a number of people anecdotally who are intimidated from making complaints, and I don't know how widespread that might be or might not be. And I just wonder if we're looking at alternative ways that we can find out, levels of satisfaction, not only from formally filed complaints. That's all.
Yeah, I think if there is maybe some way we can organize some sort of outreach to people just generally, or an idea that I've seen kicked around in other places is having sort of a review of your experience with the police after you have an encounter with them. So whether you're stopped or whether they respond to your house for something, the same as you get the opportunity to review the Terminex guy, you could give feedback on the officer that you interacted with. I also have asked whether there's a way that we can see the complaints that have been filed, and haven't gotten a response on that yet. But I think that might be illuminating if they can redact the officers' names, and we can just get a sense of what are citizens concerned about, and see whether that's reflective of the kind of anecdotal experiences that we're familiar with. Am I moderating? Should I call on Dwayne?
Sure, Adam, I appreciate that. I just have one question about the similarly about the citizens like oversight review. I'm not sure how to label it at this point. One of the things I was thinking about is, have you guys discussed the possibility of that panel or group of citizens having subpoena power to be able to access documents that they would like to review when it comes to citizen complaints? Has that come up in any sort of discussion, so that the board would have some teeth to be able to get to the documents and review information that they deem necessary to understand what the incident was about and whether there is any culpability on the part of the police?
Nori, I don't know if you remember, I don't think we got into that specifically, but I do remember Jumana bringing up the subject of, how much teeth will this organization have, and that can vary, place to place. So I think that might have been more in terms of, what authority they have to dispense, some sort of discipline, as opposed to just recommending it. But I think it's a great suggestion to, try to find a way to make sure that they can actually do the investigation as they see fit, and aren't just left with whatever the police, dump on their desk.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking with respect to documents and review, that they would be able to just pull on what they feel is necessary to move forward. And then, like you said, the discussion that you all are having internally, you had internally about teeth and dispensing or some level of discipline, and having it, that committee have some level of authority, and with that respect would be something also to consider, and that may be helpful, so that citizens may have feel more secure in raising the issues. I think one of the issues that Michael just raised about not having feelings of perhaps intimidation, maybe if there was more of a feeling that that something could be done, they would have more confidence to raise the issues that are concerning them.
Thank you.
That's a good point, Dwayne. And I think those would be one of the things that the Transparency and Community Engagement Subcommittee will continue to dig on, especially around the civilian reports and complaint system. So if you all see best practices out there that other cities are doing as far as complaints, or even measure the size of cities and see how those complaint systems work. I know that our subcommittee will spend some time doing that and kind of seeing best practices, but other folks knowing the best practices that live out there, please send those our way, or share them with the full task force so we can dig a bit on that. I know another thing that we talked about, Adam and Kiminori, was setting up a one-off meeting with the Internal Affairs Department, with the police department. So if any other task force members are interested in being a part of that conversation or that meeting, we'll probably get that set up this week so we can dig a bit more into it for our subcommittee next week. Cool. Any other questions or feedback for the subcommittee focused on community engagement, transparency, and accountability? If not, Sawa. So you come off mute.
I'm quite there, but I'll just start. I can just park. It's okay, since I'm already settled in my car. So what we had for potential recommendations were we could start a civic group, a board commission for the Takoma Park of people serving the community. Also, the city could fund a community resource coordinator to help coordinate all community activities, groups, and neighborhoods. This could potentially include a civic association for renters. We thought of having some sort of a resource book or a guide for mental health and community partners as a whole serving Takoma Park. And of course, we spoke about the 24/7 non-emergency line and the crisis response team to respond without police and increase communication with the general public. That's what we have thus far. And the issues and objectives that we have is mental health, substance abuse, homelessness, housing, budget allocation, and civic participation. And so in our last meeting, what we did was we had like a subcommittee. So we divided the 3 topics: mental health, homelessness, and housing. And on that team, we had Dwayne, Christina, and myself. And with the budget and funding, we had Ajamel and Emil doing all the work on that end. And so what we thought of for housing, we could review some sort of code violation for our apartments within the last 5 years for renters specifically. Speak to the housing development department, speak to tenants, and also once a tenant association has been formed, we could also speak to them. And really try to find out when the last time we had a county apartment inspection, because sometimes it really doesn't happen as frequent as it should be. And Wayne worked on was the mental health aspect of our group. And we wanted to find out how many calls have we had in Takoma Park that are homeless related, mental health related. And also sort of, he brought a good point that sometimes people are homeless due to mental illness and substance abuse. So we wanted to really get some data on that. So that's what we worked on last time.
Thank you, Sawa. Dwayne, I know you specifically brought up the 24-hour non-emergency line and the crisis response team. Would you like to speak about that and your thoughts there?
Sure. I mean, I was just thinking of the fact that, one of the things that perhaps a recommendation that could come from our group to the larger task force and to the council would be perhaps establishing a 24/7 crisis response team staffed by professionals who would be able to respond to issues that come up that may pertain to mental health, and it would be trained to adequately respond, provide appropriate resources, and also be able to help with any aftercare, which may involve supporting the families. We talked about the fact that I believe Rockville has a 24/7 line, a dedicated line, non-emergency line, and so perhaps that's something that Takoma Park should explore to help resolve mental health challenges that our Takoma Park citizens may encounter, rather than having armed police come, which would be the last thing that someone would necessarily want. Because I recall from the public forum that we had, the gentleman spoke about his involvement and the issues that he had with trying to resolve mental health issues for his family members, and the crisis response team that he was able to work with. If I recall correctly, he said that was very helpful and very supportive, and he couldn't think of how the police would be better able to respond to the issues that came up. I think it might have been his daughter. So that was one issue with respect to the crisis response team. Non-emergency line. And then I was just thinking about a crisis response team dedicated in Takoma Park that would also be able to perhaps be on call to the non-emergency line, but also be available to provide overall engagement with respect to mental health issues. And that would be a level of wraparound care that would be helpful for families to engage them, not just only during the crisis, but afterwards, and link them with appropriate resources there afterwards. So,
Mr. Scott, we did a focus group since the last time we were together with, we called them ambassadors. So it was the folks who applied to be on the task force, but weren't one of the 15 that became task force members, but really great amassed knowledge. We did a focus group late last week with that group to make sure we got all of their thoughts. And that specific topic was a big topic of discussion. How do you handle mental health related calls? What are the wraparound supports and services? So we're finalizing that report and we'll get it around to the task force by tomorrow. There's probably going to be some stuff in there that could be helpful follow-up as well.
that's great, because I had some more thoughts on that, and perhaps that's something that's in the report, because one of the things I was thinking about today when I was just thinking about mental before the meeting was not just the crisis team, but what level of support does or engagement does Takoma Park have with area hospitals to provide support there in case somebody is taken to the hospital who is undergoing a mental health, who's in a mental health crisis. And is there any level of follow-up, or is there a team that could follow up and provide that level of support to family members if a person is hospitalized because of a mental health breakdown? So I don't know if that's in the report, but that's something that a question that I had in my mind as I was thinking about the meeting that we were having today.
Excellent. And we'll make sure that specific piece around hospital and those relationships and how that's handled, if it's not in there, that at least gets asked in a way that we can have some additional dialogue around it as we head into our subcommittees next week. Great, Jevin, Jamal.
Any other final thoughts for that subcommittee? Adam?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, this is the subcommittee when we took Councilwoman Searcy's different tasks, recommendations that she wanted us to look into making, had been assigned the canine issue. Is that right? Jevin, Michael, I'm not sure if anyone can recall what the breakdown was, but there was a meeting where we had a bullet list of all of Councilwoman Searcy's recommendations. And I think the issue of the canine policy went to this subcommittee. I was just curious whether, I know you guys have got a lot on your plates, so just wonder whether you had kicked that around at all. My sense from watching the reconciliation meeting was that the council has to make a decision pretty soon. And I think that they said at that meeting that they were going to postpone just to try to get some feedback from the task force.
Our subcommittee hasn't had that discussion. Thank you for raising that, Adam. Our subcommittee hasn't had the discussion yet, but we can earmark it for our next subcommittee meeting.
Jevin, let's make sure we circle back on Adam's last point about they're holding on the decision to get feedback. Let's make sure we check with council members on what that timeline looks like to make sure it's timely. And if it can't wait for another meeting or two, let's prioritize that. One thing where the canine issue came up most recently was in the focus group we did with the police officers. And I know we sent that around, it's in the resource folder. A couple of the officers expressed thoughts on that, that hadn't been part of the dialogue so far. And it was an interesting one. It was a recruitment argument, not a response argument, that it's something that they get asked a lot about in their recruiting, which was an interesting data point as well. So make sure you know that those reports are in the resource folder if you haven't had a chance to see them yet. Perfect. Great. What's next?
Awesome. I'll turn it over to to Jevin to introduce our subject matter expert. I see you in here, Claudia, Ms. Charleston. Jevin, would you like to introduce?
There we go. Yep. Thank you, Jamal. And thank you, task force members, for reporting out on our subcommittees that we had last week, and looking forward to our next conversation. We have two subject matter experts joining us today. The first of which is Ms. Claudia Tolson, who is with the Takoma Park Police Department. She serves as the Victim and Witness Coordinator and is here to talk to us about her roles and responsibilities with the Takoma Park Police Department. We'll present for a brief amount of time, about 15 or so minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A session afterwards. So I know that this has been a topic of conversation for us here as a group. So please feel free to have your questions reserved for the end of the discussion, and let's jump right into it. Claudia, thank you for joining us today. We are so excited for your presentation, and we appreciate you taking some time with us. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi again, Claudia Tolson. As Mr. Hodge stated, I'm the victim witness coordinator with the department. I'm a civilian employee. I'm not a sworn individual with the department, but my role is mainly to be an advocate for the victims that come through the department. So mainly focusing on victims of domestic violence, victims of serious offenses such as assaults, rapes, sexual abuse, things like that, felonious assaults. But one of my main focuses is domestic violence with the department. So I'm in charge of updating the department with literature, informing officers with new trends that are being seen and researched in the field of domestic violence and victim assistance. I wear a few hats because I do a lot of different things here, but my main focus again is to be a support and an advocate for the victims that come through the department. So that could mean helping someone with anything really. There are times where I go to court with victims to assist with filing peace and protective orders. There are times I can help victims file their own charges if for whatever reason officers are unable to file charges at the scene, be it because the offender is no longer there, be it if they can't determine who the aggressor is. Lots of different reasons why charges may not be filed, but that's something that I can assist victims with. Also, I can assist victims with accompanying them to the hospital. For example, if it was a serious assault or a serious rape, I'm there to support them and to accompany them if they don't want to go to these places on their own, or if they just need additional support, I'm happy to help them with that. Also, at times, officers may call me or ask me to respond to a scene depending on the nature of the case. For example, I responded to a situation where it was two young girls, they were related, and a woman had taken them into her home because they were being, the younger victim was being assaulted by the father, and it was just a very, very complicated case. But the officers were met with some sort of resistance, a little bit of hesitancy on the part of the victims to really open up to them and get them to explain the situation. So sometimes when that happens, as we can all imagine, you know, a victim being asked very sensitive questions by someone in an authoritative position, especially a male, they might feel a bit nervous, a bit scared. So there are times when officers contact me to come out and speak to them, try to understand the situation, and then try to get the victims to open up to the officers to explain what's going on so that we can get them the appropriate assistance. But in a nutshell, that is a little bit of what I do. Every day is different. For example, today we had a victim who walked into the lobby. She's a victim of a very serious domestic violence assault from this past week. So I was out helping her, trying to get some things squared away in terms of finding her legal representation for her protective order hearing. And of course, the offender's in jail, and she's concerned and she's afraid that the offender will be released. So a lot of very minute crisis counseling at times. So again, every day can be different. I have my specific roles and my specific responsibilities, but at any point in time, I could be doing a number of things. I also translate for Spanish-speaking victims, Spanish-speaking witnesses. There are times when I am involved in cases where, especially if we have a very sensitive case, the detectives will involve me in speaking to the families, communicating and updating the victims, and making sure that they are understanding the process, as well as understanding what the detectives are doing, what they're working on, what they're following up with. I also explain the court procedures to victims. A lot of the times these cases end up going to trial, they end up going to court, and victims may not understand that process, or they might be apprehensive, they might be scared about having to go to court, having to face their offender, having to testify, having to communicate with the state's attorney's office. So I'm essentially the middle person in making sure that they're updated, they have all the information they need. I try to always make sure that I tell victims and the people that I work with that, you know, if there's anything that they need, anything that they're confused about, any questions that they have, to please contact me. And I make myself available to make sure that I can communicate with them, and, you know, I'm receptive to trying to get to them and get to their questions and get to their concerns as soon as I can. So it can be a little overwhelming at times, only because people's needs vary. So that's one of the things that I do struggle to balance that sometimes, because especially with working from home, you know, the lines are being blurred now with when do we work and when do we not work. But I am on call. I am a 24-hour on-call employee, so there may be times when detectives call me to come in if it's an especially serious case, or if they need me to assist the victim after hours. But I believe I covered a lot, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And if I can think of anything else that I do, I'm happy to do that. And then of course I assist with whatever the department needs. For example, we have a toy drive that we provide children with toys every Christmas. So that's something that I assist the the lieutenant with every year. And then any other endeavor, any other community program or community drive that we're working on, I try to let Kathy Plevy, our PIO, know that I'm here, I'm available to help. So I try to make myself kind of be everywhere and assist in any way that I can.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing all of that. That was a really, really helpful presentation. I know the task force members have a variety of questions, so let's do the raise hand feature if we can do that to start, and we'll just go in order. Who has the first question? Go ahead, Jide.
Sorry. So approximately how many calls for service are you like directly dealing with?
It honestly depends. I get in touch with probably about 80% of the victims that come through to the department, whether it's by phone, whether it's by scheduling a meeting with them, whether it's bringing them in to be interviewed by the detectives and me kind of sitting in on the interviews to offer support. So I don't have a specific number, because I try to contact basically every victim that comes through the department, unless of course it's something where I know I won't be able to provide too much assistance. For example, there might be a case where someone had something stolen from them, and there's really only so much I can assist with in terms of helping that person recover whatever property was stolen. So my main focus is working with victims of, again, domestic violence, victims of serious crimes, serious offenses, victims of armed robbery, victims of identity fraud, things like that. But I do make it a point to try to reach out to victims of even auto thefts, because that's something and theft from autos that's plaguing Takoma Park. So even if it's just to say, hey, you know, I'm here, I can answer any questions or concerns that you might have. I can provide any resources if you feel that you need something specific, or if there's anything, you know, in the report that maybe I can address, I try to address that. So I don't have a specific number, but I do try to be involved in the majority of the cases that come in through the department.
And do you find that there's sufficient staffing for this, or is there a greater need for assistance in that area?
I'm trying to think how to answer that. I don't want to say that I'm overwhelmed doing my job, because I'm not. And I have a little bit of, I guess I should explain a little bit of my background. I worked in corrections for about a year with Montgomery County. I worked at the pre-release center for a little over a year. And after that, I have been working in the field of domestic violence and victim advocacy since 2014. So going on a little over 6 years of experience working with victims of crime and victims of domestic violence. So I like to think that I have a handle on the volume of the calls that we get. Certainly, of course, there are times when, even though I reach out to a victim, they might be fine on their own. They might just say, okay, hey, I have your number, I'll call you if I need you, and then never hear from that victim again. So a lot of victims and a lot of people that we work with are self-sufficient. They are able to manage on their own. But then, of course, when you have serious violent offenses, of course, you're going to have to support them and be there with them a bit more, as opposed to someone who didn't have a violent crime happen to them. So it really depends. And again, like I said, every day is different, but I like to believe that I'm able to handle the volume of the victims and the volume of the people that come in through the department, at least in terms of how I can help them. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay, I'm happy to dig into that a little more.
I'll follow up if I don't know if I'm monopolizing the time here.
No, go for it, Chide.
So, I mean, I guess my other question would be, like, if you had kind of an unlimited budget, are there other areas that you think are needing like reinforcement or additional assistance and things like that would be warranted?
Do you mean for the department in general, or more so from my role specifically?
More so from your role.
I mean, unfortunately, this is the world that makes, money makes the world go around. And a lot of the times the victims that I'm running into, the people that I'm running into, sometimes it's just a lack of finances. Sometimes people might say, well, I don't have the money for a lawyer. I don't have the money to pay these tickets. I don't have the money to replace what was stolen. I don't have the money to do X, Y, and Z. So in a perfect world, I would have an expendable budget where I can say, here, this is, here's the money that you need, or here's something to start you off in the right direction to at least replenish what was taken from you, to at least help you going forward. But unfortunately, I don't have that. I did work in a program where we would assist with minor things, such as, helping domestic violence victims get their locks changed, helping them get cabs to and from their appointments, helping cover their medical expenses. So if I were to have that, that would be great, but obviously that's probably not something that will be happening in the near future, if at all. So I just have to be resourceful and keep updated on the resources in the community, the resources in the county, the resources in the state. So I hope that answers your question a little more.
It does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And Ms. Polson, I know it puts you in a tough position to say, do you have enough resources or not? But one of the things this task force is looking at is how we take a broader look at public safety. And part of that is making sure that the folks who have been victims are resourced in a way that is appropriate. So that's where some of these questions are coming from. Kiminori, go ahead.
Yes. Do you work with state agencies? I guess the governor's office has sort of victim injury compensation board, as well as probably the victim notification system, things like that. And how is that working out and helping out what you're doing?
I can't say that I have a contact in that office that I can kind of bounce to and from with, but I am aware of the resources. I make it a point to let victims know that these resources are out there. For example, you mentioned the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board. That's a program in Maryland where victims of crime can apply. If they were the victim of a crime, they can try to get some sort of financial compensation to replace or to assist or to reimburse them based on whatever their losses are. Now, when I refer victims to the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board, it's usually after I refer them to the Montgomery County program, because Montgomery County has a program where they do provide compensation, but I believe their limit is $2,500. I'm not 100% sure if that amount has changed or if that's accurate at this time, but from when I last was referring victims there, I believe they would reimburse and assist to that amount. Now, anything over that it would be referred to the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board. So for example, if someone needed burial assistance, that's something that I've helped victims with in the past. Usually that would go through the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board simply because they have a larger amount of money that they can reimburse. I want to say it's $25,000, but again, I'm not 100% sure. It's escaping me at this time. I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? Because I was in a train of thought and it just took me somewhere else.
No, I was just wondering, like, if I know that that service, the compensation board exists, but I was wondering if that's been accessible to the victims that you have interaction with and help with.
Well, every victim has to apply to that program, and I do assist victims with that application process. And also the county program has their own victim assistants who also help with that. So whether it's me referring them to the county program or whether it's us doing the application in-house and then having the application sent out, it really just depends on what the immediate needs of the victim are. If they say, hey, I just have, I just need something to get me to for example, if a victim breaks their arm and as a result of a crime and they need to replace lost wages from the time that they were home with the broken arm as a result of the crime, for an extended period of time, if the victim cannot work, then they're obviously going to get a bigger reward and a bigger amount from the state program as opposed to the county program. But I'm remembering your question again. You were asking about the governor's office and how much we reach out to them in terms of finding resources. But they have a lot of great programs, and I try to make sure that I let victims know what their programs are. For example, Criminal Injuries Compensation Board, they have the victim notification system to when victims can be notified about their offender being released from custody, their protective orders being served, things like that. So I can't say that I work with someone specifically in that office, but I am aware of the resources that they offer, and I try to make sure that the victims know about that. And I try to make sure that we sign them up for whatever they can be signed up for and make sure that they understand how the programs work so that if they do want to go forward, I'm there to help them with the application, with signing up, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Adam, go ahead.
So thanks for joining us. I have kind of a three-part question, but I hope it will be easy to follow.
Sure.
My first question, I wonder whether you or maybe Captain Frischkorn could tell me whether the Takoma Park Police have a mandatory arrest policy in domestic violence cases, meaning that if the police have probable cause to believe that some kind of domestic crime has occurred, they make the arrest regardless of, there's no discretion essentially. Do you want to take that question first? And then I'll follow
I can try to answer your question, but I think that's a question for Captain Frischkorn because he is the captain of patrol, so he can speak to it a little bit more. But I will say, in certain situations, it's not possible to arrest simply because the offender may not be on the scene. It could be a situation where the officers can't determine who the primary aggressor is. There are times when it's a mutual aggression, a mutual offense, and maybe one party is saying one thing and the other party is saying the other thing. So, either nobody gets arrested or either everyone gets arrested. And of course, sometimes that's not ideal. So I will say, to answer part of your question, yes, we have policies for that, but it may not physically be possible depending on that situation.
But if they're on scene and the officers have probable cause, they're going to make the arrest.
Yes.
We have a pro arrest policy. Just jumping in there real quick.
Okay. And just my related follow-up questions are, Claudia, I'm wondering whether you have any role in being sort of a liaison with the state's attorney's office after charges are filed to help the victim navigate whether they actually want to proceed with the case. And part three is in cases where they don't and want to proceed and the charges are dropped, do you have the bandwidth to sort of follow up with those victims and try to provide other services with them if there's, if the state's not going to be involved in trying to prevent another domestic incident.
Yes. Now, at the end of the day, I try to remind victims that they have the right to self-determination. They are the ones who get to decide what they want to do. Yes, we have our policies. Yes, we have our recommendations. Yes, we can, tell them till we're blue in the face what we think is best to keep them safe. But at the end of the day, we can't force them to file charges. We can't force them to go to court unless, of course, there's a subpoena. That's a different story. But I try to make sure that victims know, hey, this is your life, this is your case, and you know your life better than we do, and we can recommend things, and we can certainly stress to you the importance of following through with protective orders, going to court, making sure you testify against the offender. But at the end of the day, they're the ones who ultimately decide what they need to do for that moment in their life. To answer your question, yes, I do. That's something I should have mentioned earlier. I do work with the state's attorney's office fairly regularly. I get requests for evidence in domestic violence cases, and I send them everything that we have. And I communicate with them on a pretty regular basis. I think in the last week or so, I've gotten about 5 different requests for 5 different cases. So and I'm always being emailed by different people in the state's attorney's office, not just for domestic violence cases, but for different cases such as armed robbery, things like that. So I do work with our here in the county, the state's attorney's office pretty regularly on a basically weekly basis. And I do, the state's attorney's office, I will say, they are, especially the older or the more senior victim assistants, I'm sorry, not victim assistants, they're legal assistants and victim witness coordinators that they have in their office. They are great. I have one of the legal assistants who I communicate with pretty regularly, and she'll ask me like, hey, was this victim cooperative? If I call her, do you think she's going to be receptive? Will she come in if we ask her, what do you think? And I really appreciate that because they don't have to ask that, but I guess they trust my judgment enough to say, hey, let me just ask Claudia. She's been talking to this victim and see what she thinks. So we have a pretty open dialogue when it comes to that. And it doesn't happen with every legal assistant at the state's attorney's office. It's been more so the ones that I've been communicating with basically since I started in this position. But to answer your question, yes, we do communicate with the state's attorney's office very, very regularly. And when it comes to cases being dropped, the legal assistants do a good job in keeping me updated. I try to make sure that I'm keeping updated with any updates in the case, checking the status of the case, checking the status of the offender, if they're still incarcerated, just to make sure that I can let the victim know what's going on. The victims are obviously going to try to continue on with their lives as best they can. So I do kind of take it in a way that it's my job to make sure if something changes, that they know about it. If they're at work all day and they just can't get to a computer and they need to know something that's changed in the case, I try to make sure that I'm calling and saying, hey, did you know that, he was out, he was released, she was released, the case was dismissed. I actually had a case last week. It was a carjacking, a pretty serious carjacking case where the victim was, her car was stolen from her. And she had a gun pointed at her. She was obviously very afraid, very traumatized. And this happened sometime last year. And I was looking up the status of the case, and I found out that the case was null prost, which means that they're not going to prosecute the case. And I was stunned only because I had been communicating with the state's attorney and the assistant for so long about this case. And I thought everyone was on the same page. And to say the least, the victim was extremely upset that the case was simply not going forward, and she was really hoping that it would so that she can try to get restitution because she did face financial loss as a result of the crime. But that's just an example of when things like that happen. I do communicate that to victims so that they know what's going on, because it's their right to know what's going on. It's not necessarily a choice. So I do try to make sure that victims are up to date on the status of their case. And when it comes to charges being dropped or cases not going forward. Unfortunately, sometimes it's not always the victim's decision. The victim, and thankfully, I will say I have a lot of cases where the victim wants to go forward. The victim wants to go to court. They want to explain to the judge and to the court and to the state's attorney's office, you know, what happened to them. And they have a right to do that. But for whatever reason, sometimes cases don't go forward in court. Cases are dismissed, or the offender pleads to a lesser charge. So it's not always in the victim's control as in terms of what's happening to the case. But, and again, going back to this piece on self-determination, if a victim just says, you know what, I want to forget of all this, I want to move on with my life, they have every right to do that as well. And, you know, I just remind them that, hey, this is your decision and I support you no matter what you want to do, because nobody wants to hear, no, you shouldn't dismiss your case. You know what's going to happen? Obviously, nobody wants to say that. And if I say that to victims, they'll never talk to me again. So I tell them, you know, if this is your decision, if this is something you thought through and this is your choice, I respect that. These are your options. This is what we can do. If at any point in time you change your mind, just know that, you know, I'm here to help you with whatever you need if you do decide to change your mind. So again, just keeping that door open with victims, reminding them that they're in control, but then also reminding them, if, especially if this is something that they have something that's happened to them before, if they have a history of domestic violence or a history of being victimized, you know, just reminding them you have options, you have ways of protecting yourself, and you know, the door's always open whenever you change your mind.
So
I know
Adam,
that was a long answer. I'm sorry.
no, I appreciate that. We do have another speaker that I want to get in a few minutes.
Sure,
but
sure.
Make sure we get to no, this is very helpful. I want to make sure we get to everyone. Adam, did you have a follow-up and then we'll go to Michael, or was that everything? Was everything?
That's everything. Thank you.
Perfect. I heard the 3-part question and didn't know if you got them all in. That is helpful. Michael, we'll go to you next.
I think this can be pretty quick. So, I mean, according to the crime report, if I take out larceny and vehicle theft, there were 98 higher level violent crimes in Takoma Park in 2020. Just want to get an idea, getting back to the capacity question, how many of those were you engaged in roughly percentage wise? And what's the range of how much time you spend with a victim of one of those crimes during the course of the case? Just to, and I know you can't be exact with this because not every month is the same and all of that, but I'm just trying to get an understanding of the ballpark.
Right. Honestly, there's really no, there's no magic number to say this is how much time I spend with victims. I had a victim of domestic violence who, from the time the incident happened to the time everything was concluded in court, it took about 4 months, and I was in communication with that person regularly throughout those 4 months. There was another victim, a mother of a homicide victim who I don't even remember when that case happened, but I want to say it happened in the summer of last year. And I think the last time I spoke to her was sometime this year. So, I mean, we're talking maybe 6 months that, you know, kind of just going back and forth, emailing, calling, texting, you know, just checking in to say hi, things like that. So the way I like to break it down is, okay, if we had 98 victims roughly, and let's just say I was involved in 90, this is just an example that I'm throwing out, but that comes to, I'm terrible at math, I will say that. I didn't go to school for math, but I like to think, you know, that's, let me see, let me take my calculator out here. If I'm communicating with a victim, let's see. So that comes out to 8 victims a month. I just divided 98 by 12 on my phone. I lost it. So that's 8 victims in a month. I mean, that's a very doable number when you think about it. There's 4 weeks in a month, give or take. And so I'm communicating with, let's just say, 2 victims a week. That's a low number because I can tell you it's definitely not 2 victims a week. I mean, just today I spoke to probably 8 people. So again, not every day is like this. There might be days where I only get in touch with 2 people, or I'm calling everyone and you know, it's just a day when nobody answers the phone for whatever reason. So it really just depends. I kind of just take things day by day. It could be a day where, like for example, like today, I have 8 people that I've been on the phone with, and even up until 5 minutes before this meeting, I was out in the lobby speaking to a domestic violence victim and hoping I wasn't going to be late for this. So it really just depends. But again, I try to make sure that I'm reaching out to as many people as I can, just to let them know, yes, we have this resource here. There is someone here who can help you, even if it's something that they might think is small. But I hope that answers your question.
No, that's helpful. I guess the only small follow-up I would have is I don't think we get a breakout of domestic violence as a percentage of the overall number of these assaults and other things. It would be helpful to get that if we can from somewhere, just to have an idea of how many we have of those in the city.
Right. Now, I will say I do complete statistics at the end of the year for the annual report. That number might be in the annual report, but I'm not 100% sure if it is. But that annual report is basically where all my numbers go. So if at any point in time anyone wants to take a look at that, I mean, I would invite you to just read over the victim witness statistics, and then hopefully that can answer some questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Olson. Thank you for being here. You have a hard job, and I know it was helpful to be able to have this back and forth. I'm confident we'll have more questions that we'll be able to follow up with you on, but thanks for your work and thanks for being here. We have another great expert here tonight, and I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for Dr. Walton. So Jamal, I'm going to turn it over to you to take over.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. And I won't spend too much time introducing Dr. Walton because the name says for itself. But she's a mental health expert and has done a lot of work with the Montgomery County Task Force. So I'll let Dr. Walton tell her story, the work she does, and the role she played within the Montgomery County Task Force. So take it away, Doc.
So first of all, thank you all for the invite. Before I get to the Montgomery County Reimagining Public Safety Task Force and my role in the task force, I'll tell you a little bit about my history with Montgomery County. So I'm a kid who grew up on Lockney Avenue in Takoma Park. And then I went away for school and I lived all over the world, except the only continent I never lived on is Antarctica. So I've lived and worked all over the world with survivors of torture, with refugees, asylum seekers, survivors of domestic violence. So I have a passion and a purpose for accompanying vulnerable and marginalized populations. And then when life brought me back to the DMV area, which I never thought would happen, where did I end up living? I lived on Hodges Lane in Takoma Park because I've always loved Takoma Park. I'm a kid who loved Takoma Park, and I'm an adult who loved Takoma Park. I did not end up settling and purchasing a home in Takoma Park. Yeah, we all know how that goes. As much as I wanted to, there wasn't one available for me at the time. So when I got back to Montgomery County, a county that I've always felt passionate about, and I said, well, if life brought me back to the DMV, I would live in Montgomery County and I would be politically active in Montgomery County. So life brought me back, and that's what I've been. I live in the Silver Spring area. I serve as a member of the Mid-County Citizens Advisory Board, and we advise the county executive on issues and concerns and challenges and things that are going well in the Mid-County area for Montgomery County. And then the county executive put together this Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, and I was selected to be one of the persons for the task force. And then I got to co-chair Group 5. So the task force, we were split into different groups. And Group 5, our focus is health, social services, and crisis response systems. And our charge was really to identify the best and promising practices around mental health, social services, and crisis response for reimagining public safety. Your chief of police, Antonio Duval, was one of the persons on Group 5. And we thought that it was very important to have county experts and people actually doing the work and involved in the day-to-day. Now, this task force was very driven by the community. And within our groups, the community members, those of us that were there representing the community, we had the voice and we had the loudest voices. If Chief Duval were to be honest with you, he would tell you that we had some very uncomfortable conversations. We pushed them, we stretched them, we asked difficult questions. And I have to commend the county workers for leaning into the conversation with us. So Group 5, we really envision public safety, right, as the ability of every family in every neighborhood to have equitable access to housing, to food security. They should have family supporting jobs. They should have quality health care. There should be a healthy environment for every family to live and to thrive in. And so we saw, right, that poverty and inequity, they are at the core of the community's need for mental health, social services, and crisis response systems, which our group was charged in addressing. So we made a lot of key recommendations to the county executive in this area. I'm sure you all have seen our report, right? And so I'll just highlight, I may highlight a few of the recommendations that we made, not all of them, there were a lot. And we saw our work really focusing around a continuum of care. So it was prevention, intervention, and then a crisis response, because prevention is key. My dad always used to say, prevention is better than cure, right? An old saying. So some of our key recommendations focused around. So we really saw this continuum of care as a backbone to the infrastructure. We saw that there needs to be an enhancement, an expansion. So the county has this Criminal Justice Coordination Council, right? And we realized in talking to our county workers and our county experts, there was not much coordination happening. In order for there to be appropriate crisis response systems, social services, right, and mental health supports, all of the various people who need to be talking to each other need to be talking to each other. So this can be community activists, this can be public safety, right? Those that lead up the public safety systems. It needs to be businesses. It needs to be spiritual leaders, right? It needs to be community leaders. It needs to be a wraparound service approach. It's not about police, and it's not about police being in spaces that they're really not equipped to handle. Right? A big thing for us too came around community policing. We felt that officers, they really need to get back to a community policing model where you know your community, you understand what's happening in the community, you understand the key players in the community, you understand people who can assist in de-escalating situations. Maybe that's the local person that works at the market. Maybe that's a spiritual leader in the community. But in order to know that, you would have to be connected to the community. We were really struck as a group that many of our public safety workers did not even live in our county. They didn't live in the areas that they served. I think it's no surprise to anyone here that Montgomery County is an expensive county to live in, right? And so we heard that they were officers, fire, paramedics, right? They were living in places like Delaware. They were living in places like Pennsylvania. They have no connection to the community. And so the community is not able to develop a rapport with the people that they're seeing. And most of the, unfortunately, many of the times they were seeing them, when it came to a negative interaction, instead of Like, I remember, right, my father telling me back in the day, kids would just go up to the police officer and just chat with them. And the police officer knew the different families, right, and really knew their community. So that was a big thing for us. There was, we also, recommended when it came to prevention, eliminating the school resource officer program. I know there's another task force in the county that looked at that, and really replacing SROs with counselors, people who are trained mental health professionals, right? By training, I'm a psychotherapist, I'm a social worker. I'm trained as I approach my clients, whether they be an individual or an organization, to really look at what's happening in that whole environment, the whole person, the whole ecological system, what's happening in your home, what's happening in the community, what social supports, what lack of social supports exist. So we really thought that, the presence of police in schools, it has really been increasing over time, and emerging from kind of these zero tolerance policies in the 1980s. So we felt that replacing SROs with trained counselors, that would be a step in the right direction when it came to prevention. And then for intervention, we really like the Crisis Now model. And Crisis Now is really, it's a model that is proposed by SAMHSA, right? And it's really a national standard when it comes to behavioral health and crisis. It's based on, so the counties it's a service model that has a lot of integration, coordination, right? So it would be public safety working in collaboration and coordination with mental health professionals, with crisis counselors. And it really starts with an appropriately trained and high-tech call center, so people know where to route these calls and who to route them to. And let's see, what else do I want to say about Crisis Now? So we know that in Montgomery County, this was something that the chief of police had also proposed and looked into, but for whatever reason, it had not been implemented as yet into the county. County people can talk to you more about that. So we also recommended really expanding the number of mobile response teams, right, which would support the implementation of Crisis Now. And mobile response teams, it really involves teams of mental health professionals that are really trained to respond to the community mental health crises, and they work alongside first responders. And this is really an evidence-based intervention model, right? So you start first with assessing what's really happening in this crisis. And it's many times, it's not a police first that's required to go in. So those are some of the things. I'm looking at time and I'm mindful of time. So I'm going to leave the opportunity for any questions. I did not get into a whole thing about my bio. If you want to learn more about me, my consultancy business, my organization, it's called Core Issues. And that's really based on the fact, usually the symptoms that we see, the things that are happening, there's an underlying cause. That's something that's at the core, the root of it. You can check me out, www.thecoreissues.com, if you wanted to find out more about Dr. Simone. So thank you all for the time. And you can open it up for questions now.
Thank you, Dr. Simone. That was helpful. Task force members, I know we're running short on time, but does anyone have any questions from a fellow task force member in a different capacity that might be helpful? And then if you have follow-up questions, we can make sure we get them to Dr. Simone via email. Any questions from the task force? Jide?
Yeah, did budgeting come up at all when you guys were doing your analysis in terms of what the potential cost would be of kind of those?
Absolutely. There was another group that was tasked with looking at budgeting. But when we also got this charge from the county executive, it was kind of like, don't think about the limits. And that's something that my co-facilitator and I for group 5, and again, Chief Duvall will tell you about my style of facilitation. It's if we start to think about all the roadblocks, we're not going to move forward, right? We know that yes, there's budgeting, there's whatever limits, but that's not what we're tasked with. We've been asked here to reimagine. So we're not reimagining within a paradigm, because if we did that, if we reimagined in a box, that's not reimagining. That's reimagining, right? That's limiting yourself even before you start. So yeah, no, we put it all out there, and we worked with, the consultants and to develop what we thought were solid recommendations when it came to our group area.
Very helpful. Any other task force questions?
Hi, this is Dwayne. Just wanted to ask a quick question. So when you were speaking about resources in the community that you felt were missing, the continuity of care, what kind, outside of, I think you spoke of pastors, community leaders, what other types of maybe city resources and county resources, meaning city government, county government resources were missing that you found were missing that needed to be provided and implemented in order to develop that prevention and intervention model that you discussed?
I see you went off camera, Dwayne, but if I remember correctly, you were the one with the Howard sweatshirt. As a former Howard alum, I appreciate this question. Okay, so absolutely. So we felt that along with some of the pieces I already mentioned, right? We need youth services. We need homeless services. We found out that some of the pieces in the county that are part of the homeless response, they're not even talking to each other, right? So homeless service providers, faith-based community leaders, representatives of the business community, right? And really building on this backbone of just a collective impact model, right? If there's this criminal justice coordination council, well, there are people missing from the council, and it should not just be a police representation on the council, and that's the council's role. It's not about locking up people or intervening when they're in the midst of crisis. Yes, that's important, but it's very important to look at the prevention services on the front end and how can we move to a prevention, right? And then, intervention, and then where needed, this post-crisis support. So all working together and talking to each other. Stop operating in silos. We realized that was a big thing that came out of this work, that there are a lot of silos.
Emil?
Thank you.
Thank you. So I just wanted to ask quickly, you talked about how you decided that the best model was the crisis now model. And is that a crisis intervention team or a mobile crisis team? I guess my question is, under the crisis now model, generally, who would be dispatched when someone's unarmed and not threatening anyone, but experiencing a mental health crisis, someone with SMI or a substance abuse problem?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking that. So as part of the Crisis Now model, we really liked the work of Cahoots. That was also another model, right? And that's really about kind of street teams. So if someone's experiencing a crisis, like you mentioned, that kind of street team, that mobile response team, they would be the first. That would be, right? The first responder. For lack of a better word, let's use that, the first responder. But the other responders, if a police response is needed, there needs to already be those hooks kind of in so that they're working together. But it would be these street teams that are intervening, that know what's happening in the community. And again, where possible, prevention first.
Thank you.
Over.
Cedric?
Real quick, good evening, Dr. Walton. How was policing, community policing received by the department when that was requested? Because a lot of times I know from departments, been in law enforcement, there's a lot of pushback on that. And a lot of times there's a lot of denial in that too also. So I'm just curious, what was some of the suggestions, and at the same time, how it was received, and how what statements were brought back to you from the department?
Okay, thank you for asking that, Cedric. So when it came to community policing, it was very important for us in Group 5 to say that this is not about asking that there be more police involvement, right, in the community. The recommendation specifically was that when Montgomery County, the police department, is engaging with the community, that they utilize really procedural justice practices, right? And problem-solving policing tactics, right? So the gun, the taser is not the first response. And it has to build upon a legitimacy that you know the community, that you've been engaging with the community. We're not talking about, stop and search tactics, right? As they're currently utilized, or period. And other policing practices that really target disproportionately Black and brown populations. That's not what we're talking about. And the recommendation, this whole idea of kind of that as officers, right, as public safety workers, you actually have a legitimate connection, and you know the community, and the players in the community know you. Now, when we first proposed it, we had some very robust conversation around it. And there was a lot of back and forth and wrestling with it. But ultimately, the county folks really understood where we were coming from and what we meant. As we probably grappled with that idea, I would say probably over 4 meetings. Our group, we met the most of any group. We started really early, and my co-facilitator and I just jumped in. She is a big community activist and also an attorney. And so we met together, and we're like, okay, this group, we're really key to the work of this task force. And so we probably met maybe nine times or something. Just our group, 1.5 hours each time. And everyone was really engaged and really involved. But yeah, overall, the people that were there as part of our group representing the police, they got it. And they said, yeah, this is actually what we would like to do. We know that it's not what's happening now because we're being asked to do so much, so many different things. But this is, we get it. This is what we would like to do.
The last real quick question, was Marcus Jones the chief then, or was it the former chief?
No, I think Chief Jones was the chief at that point.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Dr. Simone, I know you've got to run to a 7 o'clock meeting, so thank you for staying with us. We will follow up. This was very, very helpful.
I do. I have a mid-county council meeting, but no, thank you all for having me. And I really appreciate the ask and success with your work. This is very important work. I'm watching at Takoma Park. I have high expectations, Takoma Park. I do.
Keeping us with the charge. I like that. Michael, I see your comment in the chat. I will make sure we capture that and get the clarity that you're looking for there. And Jevin, I'm going to turn it to you to close us out, sir.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you. And Dr. Walton, thank you for joining us today. Claudia, thank you for joining us today. We deeply appreciate your work and service respectfully to our communities. So thank you so much to each and every one of you all. I want to reiterate a charge that Dr. Walton gave to all of us here. She said, when you reimagine, that means putting everything on the table. And if you are reimagining in a box, you won't get anything done. And if I had to take that a step further, reimagining in a box is doing nothing more than repurposing. And so we have a great opportunity here. Our next task force meeting is on Tuesday, the 25th of May. Just as a reminder, we got a lot done today. This is a great day. We established a new timeline. We had substantive report outs. We had 2 incredible subject matter experts that is going to, like I said earlier, help us squeeze the juice out of the fruit so that we can get to where we're heading towards next. Thank you all for your service and commitment to this initiative. I'll see you all next week. Have a great one, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.